Yesterday, I began my program by saying that there were conflicting reports about a Ukrainian counterattack in Bakhmut. I said that I thought that whilst there might have been some kind of a Ukrainian counterattack, it was most unlikely that it had achieved anything of any significance, and if it did take place and did capture some ground, almost certainly that ground would be recovered by the Russians very quickly, and that the direction of travel in the battle in Bakhmut pointed to continued Russian advances. Well, today we have confirmation of that from a curious source, and the source in question is the British Ministry of Defence, which has provided an update about the fighting in Bakhmut, which is very pessimistic from a Ukrainian point of view. I'm going to read briefly what it says. It's always short. Russia has re-energized its assault on the Donetsk Oblast town of Bakhmut as forces of the Russian Ministry of Defense and Wagner Group have improved cooperation. The Ukrainian defense still holds the western districts of the town, but has been subjected to particularly intense Russian artillery fire over the previous 48 hours. Wagner assault troops continue to conduct the main advance through the centre of town, whilst Russian airborne forces have relieved some Wagner units, securing the northern and southern flanks of the operation. Well, Prigozhin, of course, has already told us all of that. And then it finishes, Ukrainian forces face significant resupply issues, but have made orderly withdrawals from the positions they have been forced to concede. So the latter is essentially an admission that the Ukrainians are in retreat, that they're in fact retreating in Bakhmut, that they are not advancing. And obviously the British Ministry of Defence is always going to give an optimistic spin, but the only optimistic spin it can provide is that the advances by the Russians are contested and that Ukrainian withdrawals are now orderly. Notice that the dispatch from the British Ministry of Defence appears to accept that the Russians are in control of central Bakhmut. It talks about the Ukrainian troops retreating to western Bakhmut, and it also now admits that the Ukrainian troops in Bakhmut are now facing supply problems. Well, that is the British Ministry of Defence. Slavyangrad has provided us with an account of the fighting from the Russian point of view, from a channel or a group called Newbridge Nell Intel. I don't pretend I know them very well, but it does seem to be accurate. And as I said, Slavyangrad is a reliable site, in my experience, and is a very effective site aggregator site, but it's over and above the reporting and commentary and analysis it regularly provides. Anyway, this is what Newbridge Nell Intel tells us about the situation. As of 12 noon local time on the 14th of April, in other words today, in the Khromovsky district of Bakhmut, continual advances by the Wagner Group are now putting the remaining viable road of the Ukrainian forces at risk. Now, this is clearly the road that passes through Khromovo. There is a map attached to this article. I should say that it's not so much a map as a satellite picture, but it gives you fairly good indication of where the front lines are. But anyway, it shows what appears to be a sign of Khromovo, slightly to the northwest of what is still Ukrainian-controlled territory, but it also shows continued Russian advances into a district of Bakhmut, which I presume is the Khromovsky district, obviously connected with Khromovo. And clearly what is referred to here, as I said, is the road that passes through Khromovo. And then the article goes on to say, Wagner have advanced, reaching the outskirts of the hospital, obviously an important structure, not one I know much about. And as I said, I'm not good at examining satellite pictures and maps. My eyesight makes that very difficult for me. But anyway, Wagner have advanced, reaching the outskirts of the hospital, and now pushing deeper and deeper in the center of the western residential area. And then it goes on to say, nearby to train station 2, paratroopers, Russian paratroopers, supported by the Wagner group, continue to expand the zone of control in and around the area. They are pushing along the Prov-Tchaikovskaya Street, which is squeezing out Ukrainian forces who are defending opposite the train station. Nearby to the train station, nearby to train station 1, after a costly withdrawal, the Ukrainian forces are now being slightly pushed across the train station. Wagner reconnaissance groups are exploiting weaknesses in the front line and are causing havoc behind Ukrainian lines, and a small bridgehead has been formed. In the Avant-Garde district, presumably this is where the Avant-Garde Stadium is located, the situation remains tense, which I take to mean, by the way, that the Ukrainians are still successfully resisting there. However, airborne artillery, that's to say the artillery of the airborne troops, the Russian paratroopers, are grinding out the last remaining Ukrainian troops across the railway. So that's, as I said, from this group, this Russian channel, Newbridge Nell Intel, and as I said, it's been provided by Slavyangrad. And I should say that, as I said, looking at this map, which, as I said, I can't read very well, but you can see some of the structures that are described, and it's also clear that the area of Bakhmut under Ukrainian control is now very small. I'm not absolutely clear about the scale of this map, of this particular photo, but personally I'd be very surprised if the area, the circumference of the area under Ukrainian control is any longer as great as 5 kilometers. So it looks as if there might have been a Ukrainian counterattack. If there was, it's been repulsed, and on the contrary, it may have opened the way for the Russians to achieve significant advances in Bakhmut themselves. In other words, the Ukrainian counterattack may actually have weakened Ukrainian positions within Bakhmut. There's also now reports that the Russian airborne troops, the paratroopers, have taken over from the Wagner forces the fight in Ivanivska, and apparently they've made ground. They've now recovered some of the ground. There's been a lot of ebb and flow of the fighting around Ivanivska, and there was a report some time ago that Ukraine has as many as 3 brigades located in this relatively small village or outer suburb of Bakhmut. It's important because, of course, if it falls, the Russians capture it, then the southern spur of the road from Chasov Yar is cut. And I doubt that it's actually a usable road at all.